Hello and welcome to today's video about David Gauntlett, his ideas and applying his ideas to media texts. So for David Gauntlett, the specification that you want to be thinking about is EduCAS and it's media A-level. For GCSE, you don't really need to know about it. David Gauntlett's ideas are that the media provide the audience with the tools and resources that they need to construct their identity from, and that we pick a mix from these media texts. So that could be that you relate to or identify with a specific character or an icon, or it could be a star, because basically it could be a fictional person or somebody that's represented in the media, so a certain actor or a certain person that's in the public eye generally. His idea is that it used to be in the past that the messages that we get from the media are very singular about gender. So a woman is represented in a certain way and a man is represented in a certain way, and these ways are opposite to each other and quite simplistic. And he argues that now that's not the case. We're surrounded by much more of a mixture of different messages about different genders, and that benefits society because we can pick a mix from that and take what we want from it to help construct our identity. So he argues that the media now is a really positive thing in the way that we can use it. So yeah, he argues that there's much more diversity now in terms of these representations. These are the texts that you might need to apply David Gauntlett's ideas to. Vogue magazine, The Big Issue, Zoella, Attitude magazine, Kiss of a Vampire, Tide, WaterAid, Dream by Dizzy Rascal, Riptide by Vance Joy. So I'm going to talk first of all about the Vogue edition that you have to study as one of your products for the exam. So this edition is from 1965, so there are a lot of contextual issues there that you can potentially explore. And it fits in with, mostly with David Gauntlett's theory that in the past we received these singular, straightforward messages, particularly about gender identity, because obviously it's a women's fashion magazine. So gender is key in our study of that text. So yeah, most of the messages that we get from that text are singular and straightforward. And here are some of the examples. If you look at the front cover, how to scintillate almost anywhere, even at a picnic. Obviously it features Sophia Loren. She was an idol at the time that was admired, a film actress who people looked up to, and people felt that she was attractive. Obviously she is young, female, white and very pretty. So they've chosen her to be on the front cover, firstly, and then secondly, the text that they've got at the bottom, the main cover line, well the only cover line in fact. So the fact that it says that is reinforces the idea that women are there to look good, to be charming, to be entertaining. And then if you look throughout the magazine, the adverts that are shown, so for example we have Q-Tex, Bare Essentials. On there we've got the slogan, "Are you woman enough to wear them?" So the idea that in order to fulfill your role as a woman, you need to wear makeup to look attractive because that's part of what you should do. That's part of your gender identity. And another advert that reinforces that is the applied art of eye making by Revlon. And in the copy it says, "Making eyes has always been a great feminine art." So again, that's reinforcing the idea that to be feminine, you wear makeup, and that helps fulfill that role, that gender identity. Then the other representation that we see of women is of women as a mother. So basically it's like the idea that you're either young and attractive, or you're looking good for your husband, or you are fulfilling your role as a mother, although that also involves looking good. We've got a picture of her mother and her son, and it says to keep your skin as soft as a child. So again, it's the idea that image is really important. It's part of being a woman, it's part of fulfilling your gender identity. It's worth mentioning that there is a nod to the hippie movement. So for example, on the Q-Tex advert for Bare Essentials, there is a woman who has long hair and she's got a flower ring. And the idea of the hippie movement is the idea of freedom and a bit more equality between people, including between genders. So the fact that they're referencing that, even though it's in a mainstream way, could suggest a slightly more diverse interpretation of gender and gender identity. But most of the images and the media text within the magazine reinforce the idea that gender identity is singular and straightforward. So to summarise, the gender identity represented in Vogue is singular, straightforward, and there's a lack of diversity. There's a lack of different races, different ages, different ethnicities. They're all young, attractive women who are blonde and white. The big issue, in contrast, has much more diversity represented within it in terms of gender, but also in terms of age and ethnicity and race. So for example, in the Moving On article, we have Marvina as the dominant image, but also there are images of lots of different people from different careers who have achieved various things throughout their life, and showing the way that they've moved on and the way that they've changed. So firstly, it's showing that identity isn't a fixed thing. It can change throughout your life, because at one point they were all homeless, but now they have different identities and they have developed and changed over time. And there's also a big variety in terms of the age, because on that Moving On article, you've got a young guy in his 20s, and then in the My Pitch feature, you've got a man called Donato, and he is 70. So it's representing a huge range of people. So it might be that you can identify with one of those people because you've got the same career, or you've got the same gender or the same age, or there are aspects of their personality or the way that they look that you can relate to. So you pick and choose or pick and mix from the different media texts, and the big issue gives us much more opportunity to do that. There's also the feature To My Younger Self, which features Grayson Perry, and he is a transgender person. So that's something that is not represented so widely. In the last few years it's been represented more and more in the media, but remember the big issue article that we're looking at is from 2016. Time has passed and we've seen more and more representations of transgender people. It's still not featured widely in mainstream magazines. So that's a really good example of diversity there. You might also want to talk about Zoella. So she's an interesting one in terms of gender representation, because obviously she's really recent, just from the last few years. So when Gauntlett talks about how things have changed and how the media now have more diverse representations, she's a good example of the now, because obviously she's built up her career over the last 10 years. She does offer different activities within her blog and within her vlogs. So she shows her socialising with friends, baking, recipes for baking, and makeup, reviewing different products, shopping. But all these activities tend to be stereotypically feminine activities. So actually the messages that we're receiving from her are relatively singular. In some ways you could argue against that, because she's a young woman who has been really successful, but her success is largely based upon reinforcing gender stereotypes. So she makes an interesting case study in terms of Gauntlett, because her messages are generally relatively singular. Kiss of the Vampire is an interesting one to look at, because we see some gender stereotypes shown. So although we see women dressed in revealing clothing, they're quite scantily clad, and that is showing their sex appeal and showing their allure, which are typical feminine representations, you have got one woman in a position of power. So there are different representations that can be taken there. You might not be studying these texts, you might be studying other texts, and you can choose how you want to apply Gauntlett's theory. You can pick and mix and apply it to different texts. And yeah, I hope the video was helpful. Let me know if you've got any feedback, and yeah, stay safe.